better make sure that the potential victim is we take care of that. And then what are the underpinnings? And I love the bottom one that I put in here, and I was going to highlight it and I didn't, but when in doubt and you're not sure, be conservative and assume it is a threat. Okay. All right, what are the purposes? We've got to reduce the risk of the person being threatened, but also you can't have a culture of where kids are walking on eggshells all the time. We've got to figure out what is causing this, what are our dynamics in the school environment that are conducive. So we have to look systemically too, to how do kids report, what's happening with supervision, how are these things kind of going under the radar. And lastly, and as an admin, when this was made, our biggest worry, but it is the admin's worry here, there is a liability issue. If we have information that would reflect that somebody's at risk, we've got to do something about it. We've got to act. The absence of action is an inaction, and that's an action by not doing something. Okay, who conducts it? That's where I said, guys, talk to your admin, because you have two core issues here. You got a suicide protocol group and you have a threat assessment group. They could be the same or they could be different. Typically, there has to be some involvement with mental health. And I know because we have our wonderful grant with SSPs, we have our guidance counselors who are there. We have a whole group of people that can provide support, but the admin is in charge. They're going to direct us with regards to what needs to be done, but this is collaborative. So if you see your admin kind of saying something that, oh, let's just ignore it, we need to talk, because that puts everyone in a culpable position. But most admins, at least what I've seen here, they take these things seriously. And lastly, with the team has to be, if we need it, law enforcement. It was easier in CCSD because CCSD had the entity under the umbrella of Clark County School District. Here, we're dealing with the local jurisdiction, and that can be a bit dicey because it depends on their experience, their background, their personality, and they're all different. And I've noticed that each one is they're all different. It's a little more dicey. Okay, Tyler. It's a three-pronged approach, guys. This is not one done in isolation. It's not like, well, it is definitely just done in a group. Okay, Nevada revised statutes dictate what we do. And I have to commend, this all started way back when with Valerie Weiner. We have a school named Weiner after her dad, but Valerie was really intent on making sure that schools had crisis plans and kids were safe. So she invited, actually, I was the lucky one to present multiple times on suicide protocol, as well as this protocol, on how we can ensure safety for our children. So NRS, thanks to Valerie, and then the rest of the group who saw the importance, they've made it into NRS as well as ABs, assembly bills. School administrations and your charter group who oversee are, they have regulations regarding discipline and also actions on what we must do. And so we're under that guidance too. We have law enforcement and NRS, we have what the charter schools want. And then lastly, we as psychologists are trying to provide you a protocol that will give you a little bit of guidance on what to do. And I think it's all based on good practice, truthfully, best practice. And again, it's been collaborated with people nationally to make sure you're in decent shape. So, if you follow the protocol, that's going to protect you. Okay, who's involved and what's involved, okay? Who is your team? So you have to talk to your admin to make sure. When can you? Okay, yeah, we'll be happy to get that for you. It's 388, blah, blah, blah. We'll have to look it up for you. Investigations are done by using data collection. We just can't buy intuitive stuff. We have to look at the data. Otherwise, you're walking on eggshells. You have to really look at what does the data say. We have to look at the potential danger, make sure that we know that, this kid, is he a threat? What are we doing? And I keep saying he because primarily it is more male. We have to figure that not all threats are the same, and that's really important. I mean, truthfully, I've been like mentally, I was going through, we did about the program that I had was, we had approximately 400, 450 a year in threat assessments because it's a larger district. Here it's been much more reduced, but we have some issues coming up this year with kids being in distance learning that I'm really concerned with. So we have to figure, what's the threat? Is it viable? Does it pose a threat to people? Then we have to reduce whatever the issues are, and then do interventions to support the family and the kid in doing this, as well as the teachers. So again, it's a multiple approach. What I tried to show you here was, okay, what do we have? Now remember, this isn't zero tolerance. This is different. If a kid comes up with some type of threat or something that sounds like it, the administration needs to know. An intake, and we have the paperwork for that, helps us figure out what are we dealing with here. Then if we see that there really is something going on, we do a screener, which helps us fact find who was involved, what's happening, what was said. Now it can go green light, which means good, red light, uh-oh, we've got a problem. The left side is green light, which is the administration with collaboration with you and the team would do an inquiry, gather data, find out what was said and what wasn't. In many instances, it was zero, nothing, so there's no threat. On the other side, as we start to investigate with the screener, there may be a whole lot more going on. That's when we've got to dig deeper and go through the process. So it could go either way, guys, but we have to investigate because, again, we could become culpable. What we've got here now are, there can be what's called transient threats, which are either low or no. And what transient means is it was in the act of anger, it was reactive. There are more things going on, and we've all lived that in our own lives. There's days when if your husband looks at you the wrong way, you think, oh boy, you're in for it. It's that kind of thing. So you have to look at where there isn't substance behind it, and then others between moderate to high and high imminent, where things are more intense, there is something behind it. And you can see what I try to do, this gives you a kind of a ballpark, investigate the concerns, and then figure out what's misleading. In some instances, there's nothing. Low risk would be, okay, the kid kind of breached it, but it was an overreaction. The kid recognizes what he did, and you've got some supports. Moderate, high, and imminent are more intense. You've got to look at what kinds of supports that can go all the way from, like at least in moderate, we would be looking at mental health support. High, it could be as involved as expulsion issues, juvenile court services, intensive, much more intensive supports. Imminent, when today's the day, this is going to happen, we know it. We may have to look, we probably will be looking at law enforcement and possible arrest, or at least law enforcement looking at that issue. Because again, we have our number one duty is safety. So we have to keep all kids safe, and that's the bottom line. Okie doke, Tyler, go to the next one. Identification issues. These are things I want you to be aware of, okay? Okay, you can't predict. We're not good at that. Although sometimes I have a little problem with this, but all the stuff from the FBI and the Secret Service says the same thing, and I'm certainly not going to override them. But they're saying we can't say this is a shooter, this isn't a shooter. That breaches their rights. But what we can do is look at the risk factors the kid presents or is in an environment that supports the presenting issues. That can increase the probability. And again, remember, this is more data-centered, although once we get going, I'm going to tell you, you're going to use some of your gut on some of these things, but we have to get data and look, does it match the risk factors? Okay. Guidelines and cautions. Guys, these are really important. That's why we put them here. Multiple signs. We can't just take a single sign and jump the gun. It's a multiplicity of issues. We'll never, as anyone who's does counseling here or anyone who's assessing kids for achievement, you're looking at multiple pieces. It's not just one thing. What we're worried about is an increase in the intensity. And we'll talk to this later, but what it is the kid in their aberration in behavior or their reactions to the environment, they're starting to accelerate, and you start saying, holy crap, something's going on. And we also have to look at developmental levels. Certain kids, little elementary kids, handle their issues differently than high school kids. And so we have to look at what's developmentally normal versus what is an aberration. That's why we want a multidisciplinary team look at this. Okay, this is in everything. The FBI and the Secret Service, this is constantly seen, and that's why it's so important we have to see it. We can't stereotype. We do no harm. Our goal is not to harm the kid, in our efforts to protect everybody else. We're trying to make sure the kid is okay and get rid of any presenting issues that are causing or are exacerbating problems. Look at the developmental context again. Remember we talked to, and I have a little chart to kind of look at. And beware of false cues. You know, all of us at times have bad days. It's when you see consistency, you see an intensity change, a change in dress, all those kinds of things that we're going to talk about. And the key to winning this is early intervention before they start. I said this with suicide protocol, but I'm also going to say it with threat assessment. When you've got intervention started, the kid at least knows they're in a bubble of protection, or maybe not protection from their perspective, but someone's watching them, and that intervention really is important, okay? Okay, guys, I put this in everyone, but I think I want you to get the flavor. And I want to preface this by telling you that there was a concerted effort not to talk to all the recent shootings that have happened. I did not put them in because they're not highlighting them. I have a whole bunch, I have a collection of them since Columbine, of Time and Newsweek and all those, the ones, and they'll have front page about the kids and their pictures. They found that by doing this, this exacerbated the issue. This made it larger than life. And the kids who had serious issues were doing their thing because they wanted to be on the newspaper, you know, in the magazines. So no longer is it there. And another thing I did check the internet just the other day just to see what do we have. And they are downplaying it, not because it's becoming less of a problem, but we don't want these kids to feel like they're going to make their mark. So they're being much more protective. Okay, just to give you a flavor, see, they say that there's no profile, but I'm trying to reduce I always look for patterns, and you see some things here. The kids usually were this kid was teased, you know, junior high, beginning senior high, severe depression. I mean, look at the picture of the kid, teased by you know, that he wasn't athletic. So again, you see, they're kind of an outcast, suicidal mother, divorcing father. So his home life as well as school life sucks. And this kid really felt it. Okie dokie. See, you'll see patterns. That's what's so hard with this. But we cannot profile. Okay, erratic coping skills. So we find many of the kids just don't know how to cope well. And that's one of the things we put in there for you to think through. How does this kid handle challenges? See, again, the family unit is a mess right now. You'll see also that their interest is usually aberrant, off, you know, just things you would hope as a mom you wouldn't see on your kids, on your books, or on anything that they're drawing or looking at. Okay, next one. Okay, depressed, erratic, feels called gay. Another one that is just miserable. It just is so very sad. Parents were home, had a smart sister, so very possibly between feeling the self-perception that he wasn't smart, and also being called gay, which is a big problem, is problematic. Okay, this one, Jeffrey Wise is such a worry. I mean, look, do you see the horns in his picture? I mean, that's the thing that kind of blows me away. Look at those horns. I am really, I mean, that's a red flag. And he killed himself after this. He was bullied. He figured out how to bypass a metal detector. There's conflicting research on whether or not detectors work or not, because I know for a fact, and I've said this probably in another training. We had one of the high schools in CCSD, we had just done a safety check on the school where the police were there, everybody's there trying to check everything out. And wouldn't you know it, that same day, a kid took a gun, he hid it near the football field. No one found it. So these kids can be pretty sharp in figuring out, how do I get through that metal detector? Where do I hide things so I can maneuver? But again, that picture is so disturbing to see those horns. But he too killed himself. Okay. These two little squirts. This is the one, I'm probably the one that I am like blown away with. And I'm just trying to look because I don't want to misinform you. This is the one. We did a training years ago at in Las Vegas, and the principal of this school, who was there when this thing happened, was there. So we were able to interview her. And it was really disturbing, because she said, this is from her own perception. These kids it was like shooting practice. They hit the fire alarm, and they hid outside the doors, and it was shooting practice going after the kids who were coming out. And what the principal said to us, she wasn't presenting, but she said, not when she was talking to us, this was an informal discussion, but we videotaped it. If Steve Itting is here, I'm sure, Steve, you'll remember that. We videotaped it, and she said something to the effect, I had to walk over the bodies of my kids. On some kids, I had to walk over them because I knew I couldn't do any more for them. In other instances, then we tried to go further and carry it to see how we can save them. It was very disturbing to talk to her, and I envisioned myself, as well as all of you, that's the last thing we want to be involved with. But these kids use the kids as shooting practice. It was just the most awful thing to hear. So we don't want this stuff. But you can see rejection. Parents were divorced, rejected by girlfriends. Just a terrible event, but also some of the similarities. But again, they're saying, please don't profile, okay? Okie doke. Another one. Look at these sad faces. These are not good looking kids. I'm telling you, they look very depressed. Look at the eyes here. Again, Marilyn Manson, a lot of the music is edgy. Smart sister, depressed, tortured animals. That's a kind of a red flag. I mean, it makes you think, holy crap, what's going on here? But again, those are red flags. And again, weren't wounded more than 20. That's a heck of a lot. Here's another one. You'd say, oh, wow, this looks like a pretty okay kid. Nope. Stepfather, and home. Again, so the girlfriend broke up with him, depressed. So you see, there are some patterns, but they don't want us to look at patterns. And the same kind of music and video stuff. And of course, these are the big guys. And of course, this really triggered us to get wise and start moving forward. So again, say Marilyn Manson, doom and gloom. They were called faggots. Again, the sexual identity issues start coming out, and I think it's got to be very difficult for these kids. Okie doke. This one, Adam Lanza had Asperger's, depression, OCD, opposition. You've got some serious issues here. It killed the kiddo and committed suicide. Again, you notice in some of these instances, these kids were so distraught, they killed themselves. Gosh darn, that's terrible. Okie doke. Another one. This is the term you'll see in the FBI stuff, leakage. What they're finding, and I have some stats on there, I think it's 75%, leaked out to somebody that there were problems, that he couldn't stand it anymore. So guys, we've got to set up, just like we talked about in SOS, some kind of communication system. If you hear something, say something, do something, because this kid leaked, and most of the kids do. They're saying, I'm thinking of doing something. Don't come to school tomorrow. Those kinds of things. That's a problem. Set off fire alarm. Okay, this is an older picture. I know that it's older. However, like I said to you, they're no longer putting out the stuff, because I checked. I mean, there is one thing that I pulled up, and it's got the history of deaths in schools because of student involvement, and it's a litany. There are hundreds and hundreds of kids. Again, I didn't put it up, but we have access to that. It's on the internet, and talks to school shootings, and they do it by decades. And I'll show you another screen here that will show where things are moving. This is it. We're thinking things are going down. It's not, okay? It is not. There is, I'll see, I had it up here. Okay, guys, the D actually should be above 93. For the year, for those years, 90 to 99, 73, there were 73 kids who were killed. 145 were injured, and the mean situation was around 7. That's a tremendous amount. Virginia Tech, the year of the Virginia Tech, 2002 through 2009, look at all the people in that time frame, 105, and the average was 10. Look at, they're going up, I guess is the point. 2000 to 2018. 239 for injuries, 156, and the mean of 17. So they're going up. Any way you look at it, we've got to watch. And I've already told you through the suicide training, what we're seeing is a dip. You know, we saw a dip, and now it's starting to accelerate again. And it's not only this, I'm worried about, we are all worried about suicide, because the kids are home, the families are struggling. So this is a problem. We've really, and you know what? It's compromised for all of us, because we can't see the kids. The connection is very difficult, and we've got some issues to deal with. So, violence defined. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, the issue that we always have, and whenever we did threat assessments to suicide protocol, whatever, again, one's threat to self, this is threat to the community and to others. It's what's the source of the anger, the source of the issues, and what's the motivation here for the kid? So there's one that's instrumental violence. What that means is there's power. They need to have power because they feel like they have none. Some type of advantage. They're feeling like they are disadvantaged. The second one is not really as impactful for us, other than if it has to do with mental illness. If there's some expression of just tremendous anger, again, the underpinnings are typically for the other issues, for power, for an advantage, or this number 3 one, which is probably, in my mind, probably the most impactful for schools. It's frustration, anger, where they're feeling like they're out of control, and they've got to figure out how to gain control again. These are the kids who have just no sense of power over themselves, their world, their friendships, girlfriend, boyfriend situations, and their family situation. What the research shows is typically it's a little bit of everything, you know, where it's mixed. And think about it. If we have a kid who has evoked violence, it's been evoked because of arousal for anger, the underpinnings could be, I have no power. So you kind of have to look at the combination, and I'll say it 500 times throughout this training, and people must think I'm crazy for saying it, but think crazy. Think like a kid who is in the situation they're in, and how would they be thinking? Does that make sense? Think like they're thinking. Could it be this? Could it be that? So because they're feeling powerless, the powerlessness issue is just predominant, and that's, we got to think how they think. Okie doke. This is different than zero tolerance because there's a multiplicity of reasons for, you know, an absence of tolerance. So what we have to do in our situation is look at the context and the meeting. Okay, we've got to look at what the environment produced here. How is this kid feeling, and how does the kid make sense? Again, I can't tell you enough. Go in the kid's brain yourself. If I were this kid, how would I feel? Okay. We've just got to look at what's behind it, not just what the behavior said. That's why this is different than zero tolerance, where you just, if the kid misbehaves, brings a gun, boom, we're done. We're saying carry it the next step. Okay, what a threat assessment also does, and you don't have to go back, Tyler, but what a threat assessment does is that we're looking at the contributing factors, the ecology of the system, and then the kids' needs, okay, and what is causing the issue. Okay, so I like this. I think this really helps us think it through. There are kids who are engaged in general violence. They could be kids with lots of bravado who are in gangs or trying to get into gangs, trying to show their power. That's one type of kid. We have kids who have elements of disturbance because life sucks right now for them or whatever, or they're not doing as well, or they have tremendous stressors on them. And then the other element that overlaps is the school shooters, where their thinking is more than just being troubled. They're taking action that is an aberration. It's directed either towards the school or other kids. Students who engage in general violence, the best thing I can think of, and someone might really, how can I word it? Someone might disagree with me, and that's okay. But that can be more of the kind of gang-centered. The general violence is for an intent to get into some type of social system, and or they're very reactive, and it's generally without a need to go after somebody or to make a point, whereas the targeted ones, they're making a point. Okay. All right. The way the new, well, at the time it was new, but it's now, they did all the research, the FBI and Secret Service, but it hasn't changed. Issues, multimedia exposure. At the time, and it's still continuing, but I just did not put them all up because, again, they're becoming much more low profile in talking to these shootings because they're seeing that it causes a contagion issue, which they call copycat, where other kids want to promote themselves by doing things that are just as egregious. Families who have weapons that are easily accessible tend to be problematic. And, you know, very interestingly, at the time when this was done, you know, in the 2000s, but we're back at it again. And I highlighted that in my notes here. The warrior culture, we're seeing it again. I don't know if you guys have watched so many of the different, there have been protests out there where people who have the right to carry a gun, they're carrying them. That sends a powerful message that it's okay to have the bravado to show I have power with my gun. And that certainly isn't conducive to a kid who is struggling with life and may see that as a shield for themselves. So again, this is coming back to fruition. It calmed down, but now it's coming back, and that is a problem. Going back to that one piece, and we can keep doing all this stuff. That's why if a kid drives a car to school, especially I'm talking senior high, we would have the police check the kid's car because sometimes weapons are found in the car. Okay, guys, I happened to see this at a training, and I was blown away with it because I thought, boy, from your perspective, you need to understand what's going on. And this helps you understand. It helped me. It's just very well done. There are building blocks for violence. It starts out with kind of crappy childhood experiences, and we're going to go through each section. Then there is impairment in their social emotional thinking because the experiences have been so poor. Then in dealing with this impairment, they pick up at-risk behaviors, oftentimes which leads to violence. But we'll hit each building block. The one are the youngest ones. Okay, each builds on the base, the one on the bottom. It's a cumulative effect, one on top of another. They're learning more tools or learning more disturbing behaviors. And there's a causal effect. They link these causes. Not one piece can make a final outcome. Again, guys, never do things in a bubble, a small piece. We've got to look at the full picture. So a kid might have an aberration in level 1 or level 2, but possibly with the intervention of solid people, things will pull together, and it isn't going to, we're not going to have a generation of a kid or a bunch of kids because of problems just based on one thing. And each box builds on the other. Okie dokie. Okay, this is the first one, adverse child experience. Now, why are we bringing these up? Because I want you to listen to your ear, listen to what you're hearing, either in the interviews with the parents, interviews with the kids, any kind of historical stuff if you have a history on the kid, neglect, abuse. They've seen abuse or been exposed to it. This, I put in red, First Amendment violations. If the kid's sense of self and identity is attacked, where the kids feel they're worthless because the people at home who take care of them or their environment projects them as just being not there, not valued. Exposure to dysfunction, if the kids get maltreated, if there's issues of depression, suicide, alcohol, that also, because of just family dynamics, that can cause problems, especially in the earlier ages. So again, it's not one thing, and it's just a culmination of multiple things from the next building block. Okay, where does the building blocks are kind of crappy. So what does this tend to cause? Either emotional, social, or even cognitive impairment. And there's a little more, I think, Tyler, one more click. Nope, I'm sorry, go back. Sorry, I apologize. We'll get back to that perfect one. Okay, in this kind of thing, the second building block, how do kids manage? They try to cope. Our kids are resilient. There's a fight or flight kind of mode where they're in constant anxiety, so they're reactive to the environment. Now, the threat detection or radar is altered because they're seeing the world from a very different perspective. If a kid has a good sense of help and lots of support, the issue will be, okay, we'll deal with this, I'll talk with mom. But if they don't have that support, they're going to protect themselves, and that's why they're reactive, they're more hypervigilant, and on edge all the time. And this is the trauma stuff. We're going to do a training on trauma. Okay, guys, this is Stephen Covey's stuff, but boy, does it fit. We hope typically our bank account gets filled with good deposits. You're a great kid. Things will get done. We've got power. But sadly, what can happen here is with the kids who are in a lot of stress, don't have the supports, that bank account gets withdrawn all the time because the deposits don't match what's being pulled and withdrawn. Steve did this for me, Steve Iddings. So Steve, thank you if you're on. And it really depicts those kinds of issues. Okay, this is the adoption. Because they can't cope, they've had some rough beginnings, haven't feel the stressors that are in their environment. What happens? Kids pick up poor problem-solving behaviors. Now, I think now, Tyler, there's one more little doodad on the bottom. There we go. They're backed into a corner with poor choices. There's negative things that go on. They use negative heroes. So they use at-risk behaviors to see if that might work for them, because the positive influences are inconsistent or not in existence. So they find different ways. And I would imagine 3/4 of the people here are parents. If a kid does something maladaptive, we as parents try to say, hey, kiddo, time out. Didn't work. Let's think through what might work better. Those kids don't have that environment to provide that support. And then that hits to the fourth block. They go to violence. I mean, what's left? Nothing else is working. They don't have a voice in their world, no control over their feelings or perceptions. They have no control. It's a method of controlling. Violence is a way of controlling. We feel like, okay, if I do something, not we, but the kids who are in that position feel like they can't cope, they'll let people know. It's a method of communication, but it's also a way to get rid of some of the emotional, terrible feelings that they have and catch it, get to unmet needs. Okay, I love this one. I thought, there's no bad gene. The kids try to survive. And I think you have to go into every threat assessment with that same issue. 99% of our kids are good kids. They're trying to survive in an environment that isn't conducive to their growth. And we have to keep that in mind. Okay, fact-based approach, and that's what the Secret Service as well as the FBI taught us. We've got to look. We shouldn't profile, and I know that, but I got to tell you, there are patterns, but don't think that way. We can't profile. We just have to look at the facts and figure out. And I kind of put this together: method, motivation, means, and moxie. What's their motivation? We brought that up before. Do they have a method of what they're going to do? Do they know how they're going to do that method? And moxie, I thought, was perfect for this because it brings up another M. Many kids don't have they might be thinking that way, thank God, but not doing it. But some kids have the moxie to do it. And those pictures I showed you, those kids had moxie. They had the guts to do it. There's another piece you connect with, and it's the pathway to violence. I'm going to show you that, how fast they're going up that pathway to violence, how fast and the pace, the movement. The trajectory could be usually is straight up. However, some are flat, flat, flat and go up. And what's the intensity of the emotions and their behavior? Those all help us figure out what do we have and how fast are we getting there and how fast do we have to react. Truthfully, you got to react fast no matter what, because we don't want a kid lost. Okay, data. Communication is an issue. Leakage was a term that was used. The FBI used it, and what happens is what they're saying is sadly and unfortunately, but it's fortunate for us, kids have to tell somebody, and they do. If you can see the one below, 3/4 of the cases reported someone's told someone else, don't go to school tomorrow, whatever. And we had talked about that in the beginning. So leakage happens because they're kind of like scared, and they're also letting people know, because they do have some positive friends, and they tell them. Many of the instances that I've read up on, they'll say to someone whom they trust or they're close to, don't come to school tomorrow. There's going to be a problem. So again, those are core issues. You have to listen for leakage, which I'm doing the advertisement for this SOS. Get out there and have methods where kids can come to you when they hear something, okay? Typically too, teachers might see some stuff, and that's why tomorrow we're doing a very abbreviated thing for this, but for what teachers need to look at. But it's all included in here. But you look at how they write their article, how they write their papers. Are there statements in there that say, holy crap, this is not normal thinking? Okay, some kids, I probably should have used a different word than attackers. Potential attackers may make a threat, saying, I'm gonna go after that kid. But the real goal, the real one we have to work at, is which ones pose a threat. And how do you know that? You go through the systematic way of approaching it. How do we know they really pose a threat? Is by looking at how imminent the plan is, all the stuff we had before. Is there a motivation? Do they have the moxie to do it? Those kinds of things that are critical. So there's a difference from making a threat, although that kid needs intervention, and we're going to talk about that, versus one who really poses a threat, and we have to have a serious plan in place. Okie dokie. Tyler, I gotta have you move. Thank you, thank you. Here's some things we have to look at. Behavior. Okay, you know what? I really kind of do believe this. Some of the stuff I have to look at with, you know, a questioning eye, but the kids don't just snap. It's like, holy crap, where'd that come from? They don't just snap. The stuff has been there because remember we talked about the building blocks of violence. That's why I brought that in there. They have a rough start as little squirts where there's an absence of support and they feel that their rights have been violated. So again, kids don't just snap. And you know what? We've all been in schools and you say, holy smokes, this kid kind of worries me. And then you have to identify what are the presenting behaviors that make you think about that. 75, most of the kids have planned this out, and that's why we want to be able to intervene. Typically, revenge, remember how I talked about what's the presenting issue with regards to the motivation? You have to look at that, and typically it's that stuff where somebody's wronged them or they feel they've been, someone's been disingenuous with them, that people are treating them crappy, that they have no friends because they're all wrong, those kinds of things. 2/3 of the cases acted alone, and if you notice only, I'm looking here, 1, 2, of the major ones, only 2 out of the group that I showed you that were high profile, it was a duel. Okay, people express concerns. You always have red flags. Okay, behavior and bullying, this is core. Bullies feel more secure and less anxious when they are in control. Many of these kids use bullying tactics because it's a way that they can protect themselves. And think about it. And I think that's on the next screen. Kids who are, there it is. Kids who use bullying tactics have been a victim of bullying. It's very typically intergenerational, meaning in essence, grandpa did it to dad, dad does it to his kids, or grandma did it to whomever in the home, and then it generates to the next generation. Typically, there's a victim at home. That becomes the issue because there's no other method to manage life. Usually bullies come from homes, and we all know this, but I want you to think through and kind of listen when you do interviews. They prefer physical methods of discipline rather than a timeout. The parents have that demeanor of being kind of hostile and rejecting, and you can catch that in the interviews. There's inconsistency in parenting styles, poor problem solving themselves, and they teach kids, and I've heard this more than I want to hear, you know, if somebody goes at you, go back at them. So they're reinforcing the very negative culture. So again, the victimization is a core issue, and this was another theorist who put this stuff together. Tyler, I think you're going to have to hit twice. You're going to hit one side and then the other. There's 2 types of victims, and that's what our kids are. Some are self-sabotaging. They want attention. They want to bring it on because they don't get anything but that. These are more externalizing kids. For all of you guys who know that their behavior goes out. They retaliate. They don't have control. They show their anger. It comes out. Very anxious, hot-tempered. Those kinds of kids tend to be more provocative. They bring it on so they can get somebody, and they're very aggressive. Then we have the passive kid who, and a lot of these kids in the description I showed you on those earlier ones, anxious, helpless, lonely, abandoned, friendless. You're going to see a lot of this passive, low aggressive stuff, but then they go right to the high violent stuff. So for the most part, the low aggressive may eventually become more high aggressive, but we're seeing see, I can't tell you that. We're not supposed to profile, but many of the kids do feel lonely, abandoned, no friends, or they go for fringe groups because they're trying to protect each other. So again, as you're working with a kid, look at that stuff. Okie doke. And I'm watching the time, guy. Okay, kids don't grow out of their problems. I wish I had a dollar bill for every time I heard, they'll grow out of it, they'll grow out of it. Guys, weigh that out with what you saw for those building blocks, those 4 building blocks to violence. And think about this. Are they growing into their problems because they have to learn how to cope? Typically, the ones we're talking about that have a threat assessment, they grew into their problems. We had a developmental history that showed issues were there, but not intervened. Okie dokie. Developmental indicators. What I try to do is give you some thoughts on this. Kids don't snap. It just gently evolves, okay? It's evolutionary, and there are signposts or behaviors or markers, and you'll see that in the FBI and Secret Service. They call them markers or behavior signposts, where they just say, this is an aha moment, this is a problem for this kid. Okie doke. Okay, what I try to do, guys, and I won't go through each one, but I took the core issues like aggression and see, I actually, my little PowerPoint is a little different than yours, but the one that we're going to have uploaded will have the newer things. It's a little easier to read. Let me pull mine up so it's just a little easier. Okay, guys, I want to just tell you something. There's aggression, internal. Tyler, don't even worry. We're cool. There's aggression, internal, external, and social issues. I try to break it down into the things you're going to be looking at. How do kids express their behavior? How do they handle control? How do they perceive the world controlling them? And how's their social relationships? Early elementary is different from late elementary and late in high school. So you can see the evolution. One's very passive typically, but you start seeing some unusual behaviors. You can't engage. Okay, I used to supervise one of the best psychs ever. And I'm not discounting anybody who's a psych here. I'm just saying, when we did the Columbine thing, we interviewed her, and she said, the best indicator I have is, despite my, and I'm joking, but my wonderful personality, all my techniques and tips to get them to connect with me, to engage, nothing worked. And I get you guys, I'm sure you'll see a kid like that. And it's the same thing with me. If you can't connect and engage with something, either eye contact, candy, let's look at the motivators. Life sucks right now. We're going to make it better together. If that doesn't engage the kid, and I'm not talking about autism, guys, I'm talking about you can't zoom them in socially and connect with you. We've got an issue, okay? What happens as the kids get older, there's more dramatic content, and then as they get older, they see violence as an answer to or a solution. Okay, guys, next one. Internal, external controls. You know, what happens to these kids, because their life, and we said it before on the 4 building blocks. That's why I think those building blocks are good. They start to see they have no power and control. This is a lot of Piaget stuff. Think about it. There's no control over, they have no internal personal control. The world is controlling them, and that makes kids reactive, and they get mad. I can't do anything right. It's everybody says I'm wrong. It's that kind of mentality. Okay, and then the next one, social. Oops, go back one, Tyler. The social stuff is kind of hard because we're living in a world right now that's pretty difficult, especially with this distance education that's really worrying all of us, I think. In the beginning, the kids did a lot of parallel play, not connectedness, but that has a multiplicity of issues. Those are multiple overlying presenting issues. That could be they haven't had a chance to learn and play with other kids. I mean, there's a multiplicity of issues, so don't weigh it on one thing. But then if you start to see increasing isolation or going to a fringe group, and then in the high schools and junior highs, you see fringe group, but then finding people who have the similar kind of mentality, kind of fringy kind of thinking. That's when you start saying, oh boy, maybe we've got something here, okay? All right, guys, this is what we've got. These are the factors, and again, we had everybody look this over. I thought we handled it pretty well. 5-based approach: personality, the environment within which they live, What's a triggering event and stability? And you can see environment is a school environment as well as home environment. What we've got to do is gather the data, pull it together, look for risk factors, any signposts or red flags that say, whoop, problem, problem, problem. So we'll go through each one here for you so you can see it, okay? Personality, number one, okay? And what I tried to do is kind of break it down on what you're going to see, and these are issues. Alienation, lack of confidence, excluded from groups. Okay, we'll go to the next one because I know I want you to take a break for a second. Personality, and the next one is attachment problems. They're disenfranchised. And what that essentially means is you can't engage them. That's what Judy was saying, Judy Skolmars. I cannot connect with you. There is just nothing on a one-to-one. And you see that in the classroom and in the friendships, or they'll connect with someone who has a similar kind of thing. Very interesting, I put in red, dehumanizes you. They don't see you as a person to engage and connect with, that you're on their side. And as we've seen it, and it's an oddity, kids will look through you. They'll just ignore you. You can see their stares past you. And that's a symptom we look for autism, but it's not here. This is not autism. This is, I'm not going to let you in. You're not going to know what the heck I'm talking about. Okay, the next one. Depression is an issue. As you saw in the kids that I showed you, that's why I kept those up, because there's typically the kids are depressed, they're narcissistic, thinking about themselves. They don't look at the other people and how maybe their behavior is impacting. And so how do they compensate? They try to appear to be superior, when in fact, what they're doing is disengaging. And you see it. They're moody, they're agitated. They don't seek out outside activities, and they're hopeless. You know, and that's a problem. Plus, there's the issue of potential suicide, which we all worry about. Anger and rage. I mean, underneath all this, it's there. And you've got to watch if you got a short fuse kid. Typically, like I showed you in the prior stuff, there's planful behavior. They're thinking through if they're going to hurt somebody or do a threat. A lot of this stuff, though, you got to watch, because if someone hits a trigger and they've had a bad day, and we've all been there, if you have a bad day, you can jump at your spouse at a minute's notice. That's the issue. So you have to be very careful. One thing that I think is really important down here, the kid can rule the roost. Can you imagine living with a kid who has some issues? I've heard more parents than I'd like to admit. Oh, it's sad. They'll just say, I give up. I can't live like this. So he does what he wants, or she does what they want, because I can't do it. We can't do it anymore. That is so hard to hear. So hard to hear. Okie dokie. Personality. There's remorse. That's a whole funny thing. You'll hear remorse many times in these interviews, and I'm thinking, what the hell? You planned this out, but you're remorseful? You feel sad? I don't get it. You got your outcome that you wanted. But there's the second piece of it. But it feels like it's justified. Okay, they recognize it's right and wrong. They recognize all that, but they feel it's justified. You got to watch for that. And interestingly, I love this term, because sometimes we do this with our spouses. Injustice collector. You know, they start adding up all the negatives and what's wrong here. And that gives a sense of power. You know, so yeah, there might be remorse, but because I've collected these injustices throughout the time frame, it's worth it. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Okie dokie. Another personality thing. See, this is really personality based. Poor coping skills. They're opinionated, very rigid. They don't see any options other than violence or some type of retaliatory behavior. And they blame others. They take, again, narcissistic. It's all about me. I didn't cause it. And those are issues that you look for when you talk with this kid. Okie dokie. See all the personality stuff, guys? There's just a tremendous amount of, you're really looking at that personality issue. Lack of empathy, they don't see that this is hurting other people's because, again, they're looking at themselves. They've got enough pain, they don't need it. But many of the early indicators show that quite a few of the kids were very cruel to animals or didn't really care if they hurt other people. Okay. Let's see, personality again. Preoccupation with violence, and again, it starts young but gradually moves forward. So that's what we've got. Again, the violence becomes the answer because nothing else is working. Poor social skills, again, narcissism. I keep bringing that up because that's a core issue. Typically, narcissistic people don't feel good about themselves, so they give this sense of bravado, and it masks the low self-esteem, the sense of having no power and control, efficacy in dealing with the environment. So that's a core issue. And they mistrust people. Now, guys, I was thinking, do you need a break for 5 minutes? I know you can't talk. What are your thoughts? Yes.
Yes.
Tyler said yes. Everybody congratulate Tyler. Thank you. Okay, 5 minutes on the dot. Okay. Let me look at the school clock here. All right, it's 10 after, quarter after, we're rocking, okay? All right, we'll see you in a bit. Tyler, I'll text you. Hey, babe. Good, doing a thing. Hey, Tyler, I sent one last night, late last night, but it's no big deal. Guys, you ready to rock and roll? And yes, it is. Thank you. Okay, guys, we're gonna rock and roll, okay? I know you have a very busy. Okay, Tyler, what we're gonna do now is number 2 and 3. What environment is this kid in? We have to look at the family and the school. Okay, first issue, family. Absence of significant caring involvement with the parent. Now, I'll tell you what, you're going to hear many issues where parents, a mom will say, hey, I'm there, I'll do anything I can. And you're going to have to do some talking, because typically the kid perceives something is wrong. Either there's distance, punitive behavior, they might be listening but not reacting in a way that the kid needs. So again, that is a number 1 issue that I think we're most worried about, okay? Now we'll go to the next one. Again, a family thing. Problem with guidance, the kids rules the roost. And I said this before, they abdicate control, not only because they're afraid of the kids, but it's so much easier when you got a kid out of control. That's a problem. Also, though, could be other issues, you know, and I'm not knocking parents. I'm a parent too. It's hard work. If you sense that the family system is not functional, there may appear to be neglect, or parents are so caught up with their lifestyle right now, and I'm real worried right now is the fact with COVID, many families they're struggling financially, emotionally. You know, and I keep in touch with Richard Egan over at Suicide. I mean, everyone is worried that these are going to be triggers for these kids. Also, we've got to make sure we have a talk too, and that's, you'll see in the reports about asking them what's the access to media that's questionable, or access to guns, that kind of thing. Okay, number 2, going to number 3, these are environments. Look at the environment from the kid's perspective. Remember I told you the big core thing is the kid has to, how the kid sees the world. You got to put his glasses on and take a look. If he feels that he's detached, disengaged, not connected because of the giver who gives love and support, or because their life isn't good and he can't connect, that is a core issue. So again, look at attachments. Okay, next one, school. We've got to watch. I put underlines. This is the newer PowerPoint. I highlighted some things that on each screen that I think are, you know, important. Make sure, and guys, the only people are going to know are you and your admins. Is there a covert kind of pecking order? Well, who's in charge? Who's the boss? You got to look for that, because it's covert. Typically, we as educators don't see it, or we may know it, but feel like, how do we handle this kind of thing? With that, there's a fear then. There's either a silence where kids won't project the issues. They see the admins as being discriminatory or having favorites. So we've got to watch that. That's why at the end of this, I put some points up with regards to how to, the best thing I can think of is that SOS have a box available and say, and the kids can put in there without disclosing their name, we've got a problem here, teachers and admin, we've got to work on this. There's a problem with regards to how kids see themselves. No power. Okay, precipitating events. This is number 4. Remember, we talked about the kids' personality, their environment. That's 2 and 3. Now, this is a core issue, and there's only one screen on this one, because this is it. It's usually there's a trigger. We commented that it's a slow-moving thing, but when they're reminded of issues or they keep coming up, These are things: loss of family, friends, members, relationships, objects. Some kids that are high schoolers, you know, junior and senior high, they had a goal to do something and that was taken away from them. A social relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, can be a problem. Rejection by peers, an injury, an event that caused humiliation. These are all issues that can be a problem for a kid and perceived to be totally devastating. They are for us as adults. So for a kid who doesn't have the supports or the style to kind of work through and life experiences, it really can become problematic. So these are typically precipitating events. Okay. Guys, probably where that green, icky green is, the accumulation or rejection are issues. That's what happened. It becomes a kind of like, okay, I've had it, I'm done. That's where we start to see the issues coming on, okay? And now, this is the scale of justice stuff. I put it here, and for all of you who see me doing the threat of the suicide stuff, I always have my little scale of justice because that's what you're doing. You're taking the personality, the environmental issues, what was the trigger, and then you look, are there stability factors in this kid's life? Maybe they're there and he doesn't know it, or maybe they were there and taken away, or maybe they've never been there. But these are different things that kids, if they have these, that makes this easier and makes a better outcome for you. And you can tap them in with the safety action plan. What do they have for the future? Do they see a future? We do this with SRA also. You know, if a kid sees positive things, they're going to live. This is what we want. We want them to live and not end up in jail. So these are typical things. Weigh them all out. Okay, for the kid, has outlets, lives in a family environment that has supports available. You can see all the contraindicated stuff on the other end in the environment, you know, but when the kid feels that sense of responsibility and safety and support, that's going to help your scale of justice in weighing this all out. And truthfully, we've had threat assessments whereby all the stuff on the negative was very negative, but then we had a strong supporting environment. That changes the risk category because the supports are there. Okay, next thing is integration. That's why psychs always think of this, but as social workers, I know you do. You pull the stuff together. So, what do we do? In my mind, this is the best thing I can offer you. And some of this is research and some of it is just watching and living through it. There are two writers, and I know this looks old, but again, when it all post-Columbine and pre-Columbine and all the junk, when we started to see we've got some issues, this is the best stuff we can come up with. Review the data. Look at the communication issues. Are they posing a threat or just making a threat? Posing is the issue. Is there, it's called a Menninger triad. Does this kid ultimately, and you're going to get this in your interview, what's their intent here? Did they want to commit suicide here? You notice, on those kids, that's why I put those kids up. 2 or 3 of them committed suicide thereafter. Do they want to be killed? And that's, suicide by cop, it's called. Or do they want to kill others? That's the triad. You got to see if there really is an intent to kill or desire to do so. Error on the side of caution. We've got to think this through. How immediate is the plan? Like, is it going to happen tonight or this week? How intense the issues of emotion are. And we'll talk about that. But again, if the slope's real high and fast, man, we've got a problem. Look at the qualitative nature of the communication. Look for words that are full of violence-centered or real emotion that pops out. Or you see a kid who's, quiet in demeanor and then starts to rise up with all the emotion. That's a problem. And then you got to look at, can this kid do this? Does he have the stuff, the weapons? Does he have the moxie again of what to do? Okie doke. Okay, we have to take those 5 prongs where you've gathered a tremendous amount of data. The most, again, is from the personality, and figure out what do we do. And then we have to look at what resources we have available. Okie dokie. Okay, we take the data and we have to look at a continuum of therapeutic intervention, okay? We've got to figure out to stop the imminent issues. Then we have to look at our resources. What can the student rely on, not only at home, but what can we do at school to provide supports? And are there other alternatives available for this kid to make it work for them? I always use my magic wand question. If you had a magic wand and you woke up in the morning and things were perfect, what would it look like and how would we get there? Okay, guys. Okay, you got to work as a team. I can't tell you, synergy is the answer here. There is no other way. You can't do it alone. Number one, I want you protected in case this goes to court or they get a lawyer. So guys, a synergy is the answer. You might miss something, somebody else might see it, whatever, or together you come up with a creative solution. Then you got to figure out your plan, who's going to monitor it, and who's going to actually do the interventions. And it's probably going to be multi-involved, meaning an SSP, a psychologist maybe, a counselor, your dean, your admin, whatever. Okay? Okay, remember that? Oh, I had that on my, that was one of my magazines. I still have that one. And that was in Columbine. Can you imagine having that happen at your school? I mean, it just blows me away. Look at the chairs, they're all over the place. And those kids had high-powered guns. I mean, it just absolutely makes me ill when I look at this. Okay, we're gonna go to the next thing. Now, in practice, guys, and I know I'm watching the time. Okay, the problem is, and I see this now, and that's why I'm really kind of worried, because we see more guns out there and more of these protests that are not becoming calming protests, but are exacerbating violent kinds of movements because the police are there, everybody's there. But the culture of violence is being rooted more in the sense of violence rather than prevention. We've got to work on a preventative model for these kids. Okie doke. All right. Imminent threat. That's the big thing we got to deal with. You've got to figure out, when's it going to happen? How intense? Does the kid have the ability to do it? Does he have access to weapons? Does he have, I'll show you the pathway to violence. Is there a grievance where he felt injustices? Remember always, it's one thing to make a threat. You know, when I tease my grandkids, I'm going to get you. That's very different than I'm going to get you. Watch your back. But action has to happen. And I'm just so proud of myself. But M squared. Method means moxie and motive. And I love them. I think the moxie piece, you got to have the kid has to have the guts to do it. They might have a method, a means, and a motive, but then they don't have the real guts to do it. But no matter what, we got to do something. Action has to happen. Okie doke. Okay, for an imminent case, you're thinking you're going imminent. You got to gather the data and start integrating. So you got to look at all those 5 elements. Take the personality, the environment, look at the precipitating event. What was the trigger? What are the stabilizing factors? And then link it into a risk categorization. This will help you. And we broke that down for you to make it a little bit easier. Okay, Tyler, thank you. Imminent threats, the personality, characteristics, again, you know it, and I put them down in the characteristics for you. What type of threat it is there a focused, direct threat? Is the information detailed? Typically, communication is written or very direct to the kid. Watch your back, kid, you're going to be gone. Those are not good. Sometimes content is direct, but then it could be very provocative. But if you read through it, you know you've got a problem. Typically, the plan is specific. The same thing with suicide protocol. The more specific with more details, the more you worry. And another piece, is it feasible? It's one thing, and I said this with suicide, for a little squirt to go say, I'm going to go get my daddy's car and ram the school, versus a high schooler who has access to a gun, has the targets, has a plan that's detailed. Those are the issues we have to really work at. Okay, again, I highlighted guts here, guys. Anything that I think is a real core issue, I've highlighted and underlined for you. Does the kid have the skills to use the gun? Does he have the guts to do it? I know I don't have the guts. Is there challenging or intimidating statements that are made either verbally or in written form? Urgency, sense of time is inaccurate. That's one funny thing that we've seen, that they're off because they're so connected with unusual things. They're off, they're inaccurate. Do they have the access to weapons? And again, you can tell by their talking, because the sense of intimidation, but also the urgency. This is going to be done as soon as possible. Okay. Okay, we talked about this already. Communication quality, the Menninger triad is very core. I mean, it says about the kid and their motivation. No other way out, okay? That's another piece. They don't see any solutions. That's where we fit in, guys. We give them solutions. We'll help you through this, kiddo. Communication can become disorganized and illogical. Okay, thoughts and obsession, seeing no way out. There are grudges, injustices. The kid sees themselves as a victim. And don't forget, this kid is a narcissist usually also. So that's an issue. If there isn't, okay, I want you to understand this piece too, because it's in the suicide protocol and we put a section in there. If it's not based in reality, you sense that this kid's off, their sense of reality is off, done, you got to get a hospitalization or at least get a psychiatrist involved because something's wrong, okay? And if their reality isn't the same reality we're living in, we've got a problem. Okie dokie. History, possibly none. That thing blows me away. Again, we're saying watch the kid and watch their history from, little ones all the way up. We may not have picked up on all this kind of stuff. And also the kid may have never had police involvement. All right. Again, the indicators are going to be much more subtle. Having difficulty, setting fires, cruelty to animals, being aggressive. Again, they're lower level, and it could be a much broader base. Many kids who are aggressive in school or in the neighborhood aren't going to go shoot people. Okie doke. These are issues that are triggering. Personal rejection, loss of relationships, being disciplined by, that's why I highlight each one. They're all core issues. So the underlined ones I think are just real critical to keep an eye for. The process, there's two types. An inquiry, which is a screener, and screening, and then investigatory with an investigation that's comprehensive. Both processes work for both situations. So for the inquiry, you're gathering data, you're triaging the data, and then you're writing a checklist report that's so much easier to do, but then you do a safety action plan. You will see with the investigatory one, it's the same thing, just much more involved. Okay, Tyler. Inquiry, you do a file review, your admin is instrumental in this, your dean would be instrumental. What you have to do is get collaborative information. You may or may not talk to the kid. I'd be inclined probably to talk to the kid and say, what the heck happened here? Then you look at your domains to triage where it fits in, just like the suicide protocol. And then you write a consultation report that's more of a checklist. So that way you get an idea. Typically, on these, when you end on these, there's low or no threat. It's the ones that you say, holy crap, I've got more. Then you got to jump to the more intense. Okay, the screener. It's completed by administration. We look at the data gathering and determine factors that underscore that should we do more? Because again, I want you to be legally sufficient. Yeah, we don't want you to be put in a position either as an admin or a team doing this that you're culpable because you didn't carry things as far as you needed to. It will give the appearance that you kind of went through it quickly and didn't think it through. Okie doke. This is what the screener looks like. And so you're filling this out, and first you gather your data and then answer these questions, okay? And I tried to make it like the screener for the suicide protocol, but again, it hits all the critical issues. The context, they call that CIRCON, current context and circumstances. When did we find out about it? Do the facts corroborate? What history do we have? Are there additional factors? And do we need additional information? If you're uncomfortable or you feel like you need additional information, move it on. Be safe than sorry. Okay, the next one. This helps you make decisions. What type of threat, and it matches all the other stuff. I tried to match Form A with Form B, but helps you kind of think through what was the response to detection when you say, hey kid, is this true? You know, no remorse or regret. He repeats it or amplifies it, makes it worse, or maybe forgets, oh, I didn't say that, what? So it's that kind of thing. Okay. Here, the threat, see, these just all break down so you can figure out, how do I answer that? Well, I've got the domains here. So you've got a supporting document to answer those questions. Because again, remember, anything can be subpoenaed, guys. So that's why I tried to give you as much support as you could. There's the context, the communication, those kinds of things. This will help you write your information, but make sure one document supports the other. Okay, this is the pathway to violence. This will help you answer this question. What level is this kid at? Now, mind you, this is the level 1. So I'm hoping you're catching him early. So Tyler, hit that little button, doodad, so you'll see this was very creatively done by Steve Ittings. Okay, and you hit it again, keep hitting. Hit, hit, hit. Now tell me if that's not creative. See, when you're in grievance and ideation, that may be the worst you are, and that's, you know, then you kind of deal with your facts. We'll show you later on the threat assessment, the kids are getting higher on this pathway to violence, but this helps you kind of figure out, where's this kid thinking? So you know where to intervene. We use the Mohandi threat categorization. What we did was adapt it from a multiplicity of information. So we made sure you can really look at things. Keep in mind, transient means it was short-term, reactive, probably not going to be followed up on. And you look at these and kind of helps you figure out, where does this particular situation, is. The issue here that you have to look at is substantive, where there's enough evidence to say, holy crap, you know, Houston, we've got a problem. We're going to have to go deeper. Okay. And sometimes you can't do it. You may have to straddle both. But again, if the preponderance of evidence is substantive, you got an issue. Then finally you write with all this documentation, but guys, everybody's going to say, why is all this paperwork? Because this is a big deal. You might do one a year, maybe 2. You got to protect yourself. You got to protect the kids. The last thing, I always say this to everything, I want to go to bed at night knowing I did everything right, and I want to be documented. Again, this can all be open to a lawyer, to anybody to read your information. Okay, so this is a consultation report. It's a consult, in essence. And what it does is your data sources. Okay, Tyler, move forward. Consultation, description of the incident. Can you go to the next screen, Tyler? There we go. And so what you're doing is you're linking all your information. You're just integrating. It helps you make some information. So the type of threat that you got, the information, did the facts corroborate? Those are all critical things. And we want you to think that through. The stronger the information you have, the more protected you are in protecting your kids. Okie doke. Okay, analysis, that's where you write in. What do you think? So you review the outcomes with the parents. Parents receive a copy of the report, address any needs. You file this separately from discipline or CUME files, okay? We want to make sure that if you're a parent, you don't want this information, and every kid makes mistakes. We don't want this. We want this secure. And the best place I can suggest is your principal's office or your assistant principal's office in a locked file. This is not for everybody's knowledge. Okay, here's the outcomes. No threat, minor threat, and get a safety action plan. So you remember how seeing there are two options. If there's a minor thing, but we can move forward, or no threat at all, where someone just made a mistake, misinterpreted, or our intel, our data was not consistent. However, if you're uneasy, uncertain, you feel like, holy crap, I'm not so sure here, go to level 2. And that's would be an outcome. Okay. At any point, law enforcement issues are necessary, call the police. You'll lose control, I know that, but call the police. If you've got to protect your children, you've got to protect that kid. I told you a couple times I've seen runners, and it's very problematic. But if you sense you need more, or there's a potential that something a law's been broken, whatever, you don't play around. And certainly you can call the lawyers if you choose to. This is the student interview. The 3 interviews mirror each other. There's a student interview, parent interview. We'll show you. There's a witness interview that asks more, what did you see? But here, we try to be positive. You know, tell me about good things about yourself. But do an introductory stuff. We're trying to figure out what happened here. So, okay, Tyler, go to the next one. Okay. This is the staff interview. Tell me what you know about the students. Did you see anything? What was the event? And how does he participate in your classroom? Now, these are just page 1s, but you have access to all the documents. Okay, a witness. You may or may not. I like the witness idea. Even if it's a kid, you can interview the kid, find out what the heck happened. There was a point on there. If a parent said absolutely not, I think we have a duty to protect our other children, and that's a core issue. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, next one. Okay, parent and guardian. The parent thing mirrors the kid one. The real presenting issue, and we've said that with suicide too. Did they know? If they knew, why didn't they do something? If they didn't know, how come they didn't know? What's going on? And that's where you're going to find out. Are they getting along? Are there issues? Okay, these are your domains. Now you can start thinking through, what type of threat? Was it a direct threat, conditional, that kind of thing? It helps you, and I try to break it down for you so you can figure out where does this fit in, okay? Here's more current behavior. Did he have a hit list? Any attack? See, I tried to think through what would fit in here for you, can help you make a decision. Okay. This is that CIRCON stuff, the circumstances and the context, which tells you more. Sometimes you do one and you say, no wonder this kid acted this way. We just didn't know this was happening. So these are things to help you think through, but also can be part of your solutions for your safety action plan. The pathway to violence, I've broken down for you so you can kind of start thinking, where does this kid, now remember level 2 is more serious, where does he fit on that scale? Okay. All right, just you can see all the mental status, the clinical stuff, that kind of thing. We've just got to make sure this kid's centered in reality. If he's not, remember I said time it out and just get a psychiatric, or have the parent go to the hospital. Cognition and intellectual resources, that's again more of the orientation stuff. Risk factors, warning signs, again, you've gathered so much data, this will help you figure out more. That's why we're trying to help you get centered on the core issues. Okay, Tyler, next thing, let's see, just coping strategies. Is there depression? Are there inhibitions, inhibitors, those kinds of issues? So this helps you think through what are the things I have to keep weighing on my scale of justice. Okie doke, there's our pathway of violence, but these kids from level 1 are going to be farther along. So if you hit that little button again, this one's going to move up farther. There's usually research, planning, preparation. God help us that you're not at approach or breaching it. We're hoping to catch them at planning, research, and preparation if, in fact, this is a level 2 threat assessment, so we can stop it from happening. Okie doke. This, again, is the categorization. You've got to figure out, taking all your data, where does this fit in? Where does the kid fit in? Okay. The continuation, no risk means no plan. Stability factors are present. That's a big piece. So remember, think of your scale of justice. Minor, it was unintentional, just poor judgment, and there's a low risk. Okay, and we have stability factors that are strong. So this tries to help you look at how do I make a decision. But again, we're always here to help you kind of, again, there's no formula. We have to just think it through. Okay, next one is the moderate risk. There's some minor problems, warnings, and there's inconsistency and stability. We've just got to kind of weigh this out. High risk, we start worrying. The plan's there. There's an intentional infliction of harm is there, the interest to do so. Resources are not available or inconsistent, and there is movement forward on that pathway to violence. Imminent, this is where I wrote, this is when we worry and say, uh-oh, we got a problem here, Houston. And again, it's the M's. There is a motive, there's a method to do it, how we're going to do it with the means, and the kid's got moxie. He's got the interest to do so. Access to weapons. The more detailed the plan with time references, the more we have to worry. And whether or not there's warnings, supports from the family, that kind of thing, or the factors are attempted factors for stabilizing aren't there, we've got a problem. So on the data gathering, you get your information, you look at CIRCON, which is the circumstances. How did we discover it? You look at history, mental health issues, any special ed issues, like does this kid have judgment problems, that kind of thing. You do the 5-pronged approach with personality, environment, family at home, environment at school, any precipitating triggering events, and what's the stability factors. Again, the M&Ms, motive, method, means, and moxie. Again, moxie is critical. That kid's got the guts. Sometimes we don't know that they've got such moxie because they're so miserable. The TA report, you combine these pieces of information. There are 13 Secret Service key questions. They were 11, now there are 13. You look where the kid fits in on the pathway to violence, and you use that sheet that says threat categorization with Mohandi and all that group that helps you kind of finalize where you feel it belongs, okay? Here's the report. This one's more difficult to write because it's much more comprehensive. You're saying I try to put in there where you put this, where are you getting your information? So that way it's showing you did a comprehensive eval, you're looking at all the pieces and trying to integrate the data. You just didn't come off the top of your head and come up with a solution. Okay, all right. When you compile your stuff and write, I use the dragnet then because it's just the facts, guys. As much as I know, I use intuitive thinking 100% of the time, but we got to keep it to facts. If you were in a courtroom, they're going to want to know the facts. They're not going to want to know conjecture, bottom line. Think, and that's why I highlighted this one, think like a kid. Pretend you're that kid and think like he's thinking, knowing the environment he's in. What brought him to that point? It's almost, what are you thinking? But that's how you figure it out, by thinking how a kid would think, recognizing they're unstable, have lack of support, at the point of no return, where they're really worn out. Have a hypothesis, speculate, figure it out together, figure it out. And truthfully, I always write reports saying something to the effect, it may be, it suggested that, you don't say it is, because we don't know it is. We're not gods, but we are. You look at the preponderance of evidence and then say suggestions could be this or that, or it predominantly goes in this area. Okay? Rule out the junk so you don't get lost. That's one important thing here too. Answer the potential whys, why this is going on, and start that action plan. With those whys, then you can rule out and figure out what we need to do to make things better. Okay? Sometimes this is a word of caution. If it looks like a duck, it may not be one. So be careful with your data gathering, because you don't know. This kid might have enough savvy to make a curve on you. Okay? Okay, I got to tell you this. I should have underlined it. Write the report as if a lawyer is going to read it. So, avoid, use, well, when I write, I use third person, not I, but, it appears that kind of thing. Use third person talking. Make sure your report is based on facts. You can explain things. Potentially, it could be this or this or this. Use your data to support it. And you kind of have to think through, use deductive logic, meaning you separate the junk up on top and then keep piecing it down till you get to the right conclusion or the most appropriate conclusion on what you're seeing. Okie doke. This is a reassessment. Guys, if you do a threat assessment, I would time it in your programming when you write the first one. When are you going to reevaluate this kid? When are you going to see how he's doing? You've got to make sure what you put in place for interventions is working. This also puts stress on the parent that if they've agreed to therapy, that they're doing it. If the kid gets hospitalized, we've got to reassess. I mean, it's all those issues. If the kid has improved due to interventions, we want to downgrade him. If he recommits the same issue or accelerates or does it in a different method, you can upgrade. We have upgraded kids. So this will help. This is a vehicle to help you with that. Okie doke. Prevention and intervention, we're almost done, guys. I know you're going to. Research shows that if you're reactive and punitive, you're going to fail. We've got to get to the crux of the issue and move it forward. Again, we have to think like therapists, more think crazy. What's this kid need? We can't be reactive and punitive. We've got to figure out what are the presenting problems and then intervene and give this kid some power and the family and ourselves by maintaining a supportive environment. Okie dokie. All right, this is one you've probably seen before, but again, look at the writings. If you get something from your teachers, this is loaded with red flags here. Enough stuff that blood and flesh was splattered from her. Give me a break. This is a very ill kid and very issues. They wrote in here, he's got an A- for writing and a D run-on sentences. Give me a break. Get this kid in the office and start working with him. Okay, it's easy for me to talk. Okay, next one, same kind of thing, Aryan race, and I think you guys, some of you have seen this already. Again, we've got to talk to our teachers, and that's what we're doing tomorrow, guys. We're doing an abbreviated threat assessment thing, but it's got some of the screens. But again, we want to teach our teachers what to look for because they're going to be your number one group that's going to help you find the kids that are having trouble. Okie dokie. Approach to outcome safety action plan. Are there any law enforcement issues? You may need to if there is a probation officer, get that person involved. You might need one. I don't know. You have to then call juvenile court. Are there internal disciplinary issues? All this kind of stuff, the behavior and community-based support need to be linked, and you have to write a safety action plan. But it'll probably have to be updated. Okay, and devising the plan, family, what can they do? What resources can they contact? If they're having trouble, how can we help them find and get the help? The kid needs support. As much as he might have a sense of bravado, what you really got to worry about is he's got to have a safe place and a safe person to go to. Same thing like the suicide protocol. Okay. Connect with resources, reinforce the counseling from school, get the protocol in place in case an event happens, determine the interests and strengths that you can capture this kid and get him more engaged in school. Whatever you can think of, creatively to provide success for this kid is what we want to do. Okay. The issue, okay, duty to, remember that guys from the other kind of trainings. Duty, it's Tarasoff, duty to warn, duty to protect. If there's viable, reliable, accurate points here where some kid might be at risk, we have a duty to warn. Now, you don't give a kid's name. They have the perpetrator, potential perpetrator has a right to privacy, but you need to make sure that the potential victim knows and make sure you have precautions in place. Okay. Okay, I love this one because we did crisis plans under this same grant, but this is the same thing. You can't plan in the middle of one, guys. So make sure you know the protocol, make sure you have your paperwork ready to go, make sure you know who's on first, what's on second. If you're relying on a psych, make sure you know when that psych is in your building or where you can get them. You might want to make some agreements with other admins to, if you're short or whatever, that there is an agreement, okay, that person will come over because we're short today or somebody's sick. Okie dokie. Okay, systemic. I am honestly, guys, I gotta keep promoting this. We've got to look at a systemic approach to helping our kids and the staffs know what to do. What better than SOS? We've already done that for suicide. So let kids know. If you see something, say something, either through a box or write a note. Let people know that there's something there so we can intervene. That's the issue. We've got to be able to intervene to make sure that the kids are safe. Okay? Okay, who are your lines? I did it in 3 ways. The front line, the first line is the teachers and counselors. They know these kids. The kids who have, have more success are mild and moderate. We've got to look at behavior, writings, affect, those kinds of things that are our red flags as kids deteriorating. Then we've got to look at interventions with like a SIP group if it's regarding academic stuff. If there's social emotional stuff, possibly the SSP can provide support, the counselor can provide support. So we've got to empower our teachers to let us know if we've got an issue. The next one, second line, these are our SSPs, our deans, our TAs, because they see things too. Kids who are on the fringes that have problems, they're starting to become more problematic, more RPCs. Then we've got to figure out what do we need to do to intervene, or was there a presenting issue that caused a problem for that kid? Next one's third line, SSPs, deans, administrators. These guys, and you notice the SSPs overlap because there's so much communication. We're looking for high-risk characteristics. Look at the RPCs. Then we've got to look at more direct intervening support for this kid because this kid's going to need a lot of TLC, but also, okay, if the kid gets in trouble, now what? What do we do? How do we manage? All right, guys, are there any questions, any thoughts? If you write them down in chat, what we will do is we'll respond to them, but we'll do anything in our power to help you review, help you get direction on a case, anything you need, because these are more dicey issues and there's so much to rely on in making decision making. Okay, at this point, I don't see chat, so send them, put them up or send them to us. We will do everything in our power to help you. Okay? And it's a little after 11. We did it. So tomorrow is a training. It's for what do we do for the actual for the